Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is interesting, and that's it kind of is one of the bigger lore-heavy episodes of this. And I do remember seeing this episode. I remember liking this episode and thinking it was very good and very interesting. But yeah, it's kind of a little bit more fresher in my mind because I literally just watched it. But this episode is interesting in that the main antagonist is kind of morally ambiguous. I'm not entirely sure what she's guilty of. She definitely did something to think chemical warfare or something like that, but which I will explain in a bit. But in case, the episode opens up with a soccer game where it's revealed that Fred is actually we finally figure out what Fred is into sport for. He plays soccer, and apparently he missed the game, and his teammates are complaining about it. So yeah, they openly trash talk him while they're trying to play soccer, and at one point, one of the players on the opposing team fouls the Crystal Cove. I think the Crystal Cove urchins, I think, is what they're called. But yeah, one of the opposing teams fouls one of the urchins, and they go down. And of course, several of the other urchins complain to the ref, pointing out that was a very flagrant foul, and that they should be given a red card for that. So and in any case, while everybody is arguing on the field about whether or not it was a foul or not, several of the people in the stands actually start arguing as well. And as they obviously sports debates can get very heated. Obviously, sports fans can get very heated because when their favorite team isn't winning, and that seems to be a bit of a commentary here because two of the fans get. Two fans from two of the different teams, they start getting confrontational with one another and start arguing, and also start throwing things at each other, which is why they start arguing in the first place. But in any case, as they're actually arguing, suddenly a strange mist and several flowers just start floating onto the field, and immediately after they do that, everybody is notably a lot more lovey-dovey and friendly. It is like an immediate reaction, and is very strange and hard to explain. And effectively, everybody just stops fighting and starts loving each other. And it's at this point where one of the players actually tells someone that to actually thanks a lady on the field who he claims is very beautiful, and wonders if cheers of joy are appropriate. And then the lady turns around and faces the camera, and we find out that she's actually the main antagonist, Aphrodite, who is the monster of the episode, and claims that and turns to the camera claiming that tears are only the first to come. So yeah, Aphrodite is a very interesting character overall. I do like the fact that they named her after the goddess of Greek goddess of love. Like that already gets points to me for me in my book. But in any case, Mystery Inc. the next morning actually start reading through the newspaper, and Velma wonders if anybody else noticed the strange happenings on the field last night, and Fred admits that he wasn't, because obviously he wasn't there, and Scooby and Shaggy are kind of just worried too much about the fact that Shaggy apparently didn't eat because turns out he had a test, he was too nervous, and he forgot to eat breakfast, so he was very hungry, and Scooby didn't help the matters because Scooby offered him a box of Scooby snacks, but by the time Shaggy got some, it was basically empty, and there was literally just dust. So, yeah, unfortunately, that didn't wind up happening. But in any case, after contemplating that, after discussing the happenings on the field a little bit, pointing out that it's very strange, they then walk into the classroom and admit that it's very stranger. And so, first and foremost, the first thing they notice is that the leader of the chess squad is currently very lovey-dovey with a cheerleader, which they note is odd. But also, somebody is voluntarily hanging out with a girl that Velma points out is nicknamed Hot Dog Water, and Shaggy wonders out loud if she's actually about hot dogs, and because he was half paying attention, and also because he's hungry, and then also notes that and then also cheers for reasons that he points out later. But Fred, misinterpreting him, assumes that he's cheering because he thinks hot dog water actually has hot dogs. So he decides to kind of correct her with a bit of a scientific explanation about why hot dog water smells like, well, hot dog water. I'm not going to go into like all the science and all that, mainly because I'm not very smart to be able to talk about all that, and also I'm doing that from memory. But basically what Fred explains is that it's a combination of the fact that hot dog water doesn't shower after gym, and the fact that she wears stuffy sweaters at all times. Those two kind of combine together to create a very signature scent that everybody describes as hot dog water. So yeah, she smells like hot dogs because she doesn't shower after gym, which is gross. But yeah, and that's kind of an unfortunate nickname to give somebody just because they smell bad. But it's at this point where Shaggy reveals why he was actually cheering and proceeds to explain about how he's actually cheering because he knows that they have a substitute teacher, and that means no test for Shaggy. So he's obviously very happy about that, and decides to go and greet the new professor personally. But when she turns around, it's revealed that she's actually Aphrodite, who proceeds to blow some of her flower mist in his face, telling him to feel the love. And from that point onward, Shaggy has a very love-struck look on his face, and actually winds up following Velma to class, and Velma actually notices this, seeing him peering at her through the window, and asks him when she tries to get him to go away, pointing out that it's in the middle of class and that he needs to leave. He merely blows on the glass and draws a heart on it in it, which causes her to question about whether or not he has blood sugar, and actually opens the window to check on him. At which point Shaggy points out that he isn't really worried about all of that as long as he has Velma. It proceeds to come in with a bucket full of flowers, which he then picks up and blows at her, which causes her to suddenly become head over heels for him, even though they have been established to not like each other very much now. Obviously, because they broke up. They're not particularly happy around one another. But in any case, they then proceed to start dancing and leave class almost immediately, which causes Shaggy to spread several more flowers around the room, which cause several more happy couples to start cropping up, and later they actually accidentally bump into Fred and Daphne, who are with Fred currently discussing traps and about how he's currently building one, which Daphne voices interest in actually wanting to see. But at which point Shaggy and Velma bump into them, spread flowers over them, and they become head over heels in love, which has been established at this point. It's been established that they're a couple, but this kind of further cements that fact. This kind of further cements the fact that they like each other by kind of enabling them to just be lovey-dovey uninhibited. But meanwhile, Scooby is currently looking for his teammates because he has no idea where they are, and obviously it's a little bit later than they normally get out of school. So he goes looking for them throughout the school, and while he doesn't find them, he eventually runs into Aphrodite herself, who actually is coddled by several different students, including Hot Dog Water, who just comes up and they all just come up and start cuddling him, and Aphrodite points out that she feels bad for Scooby because he isn't able to feel the love, and points out that she'll fix him right away, and proceeds to blow several flowers on him when it doesn't work because he's a dog. As it turns out, that whatever she's been doing to make people fall in love doesn't work on Scooby, likely because, and there is an explanation, some more scientific explanation to that, but for right now, just the fact that he's a dog is enough to keep him from actually, falling in love and feeling the love tonight, if you know what I mean. But in any case, once Aphrodite realizes that Scooby is actually immune to her flowers, she then just does a full 180 and orders her newfound minions to capture Scooby. At which point Scooby tries to run the hell out of there, and in the process actually winds up running into the rest of the gang. But because they're currently head over heels in love for each other, and they don't actually notice Scooby and just continue going on their merry way. At which point At which point Aphrodite orders the rest of the group to capture Scooby, and he proceeds to run into town, where we find out that the town is a bit of a mess. As we find out, because everybody's spraying the love and flowers all over the place. There's been a couple of car wrecks, and also there's a couple of fires that have broken out here or there. So yeah, because everybody is just kind of loving each other, they're not really paying attention to their surroundings. It seems they're causing a little bit of carnage. But in any case, Scooby then wonders aloud what's happened to Crystal Cove. At which point, Aphrodite, riding in the back of the Mystery Machine with the rest of Mystery Inc., proceeds to order Mystery Inc. to run over Scooby, which they do unquestioningly, because obviously Aphrodite is their love goddess. And sure enough, Scooby has to duck into an alley to avoid them, and he does successfully avoid them. But then he hears a voice, and he turns around to discover that Professor Pericles is currently staring down at him from a stack of crates, and Scooby's a little confused as to seeing Professor Pericles out and about, and sure enough, Professor Pericles properly introduces himself, pointing out that this is the first time they've actually met, and proceeds to point out that he actually notices that there's a bit of a love problem. And sure enough points out that he could actually easily provide the antidote to help, which Scooby finds questionable. And sure enough, Professor Pericles muses out loud if Scooby thinks he has ulterior motive, which Scooby wasn't exactly thinking that, but he doesn't deny it. But in any case, Professor Pericles proclaims that obviously he's head over heels over the fact that all of his human tormentors who locked him up like an animal, he's kind of reveling in the fact that they're all kind of being tormented a little bit, and it does put a smile on his face, since obviously they locked him in an insane asylum. Especially because of his presumably demented, deranged mind, as he puts it. He also points out that Crystal Cove is his home, and while it does amuse him to see the humans acting the way they are, he's not going to let his home be attacked by some so-called love goddess. So with that, he decides to actually help Scooby create the antidote, and proceeds to tell him that they'll need to actually gather a few ingredients and also make some preparations first. And while they go off to go and do that, we actually see a quote-unquote date between both Shaggy and Velma and Daphne and Fred. Obviously, Shaggy and Velma are doing two completely different things. Velma is currently doing math, and Shaggy is kind of teaching her about cuisine, which while they don't fully understand each other, they decide that it doesn't really matter because they're in love, quote unquote. Shaggy just offers her a very unhealthy dish in response to her solving some variables, and she merely responds that she feels an artery closing up, but Shaggy merely lovingly points out that it's okay and that she has more. Meanwhile, Daphne and Fred actually wind up working on a trap together. It's implied to be the same trap that Fred was pointing to in the magazine that he had earlier. But obviously they get stuck in it because that's a recurring thing with all of Fred's traps. It then proceeds to deposit him out of Fred's window and into the lawn. And Fred merely remarks that he needs to work on the trap, but he'll do it later, which causes Daphne to swoon over him, pointing out that that's the first time he's chosen her over a trap. And sure enough, this is at the point where Scooby and Pericles come in, and Scooby's decked out in the nines in a combat vest with a bunch of different pockets and a little perch for Pericles, seemingly, which is kind of cute. But in any case, the three of them then proceed to go out to collect all of the ingredients that Pericles needs to finish his little thing that he's making. And sure enough, the first thing he goes for is pewter, which he claims is found in stained glass windows. So they go to an old church to go harvest that, and then he also claims that he needs ectoplasm to make the antidote as well, which he points out can be found in the Crystal Cove Museum of Oddities and a Museum of Oddities and Spooky Things. I don't think that's the actual name, but I'm gonna go with it. But And sure enough, he refers to the ingredient as ghost mucus, which is accurate. And also, I do have some questions regarding the ectoplasm itself, since it's been established up to this point that the monsters might not be real. Obviously there's the idea that there haven't been many supernatural horrors in this one. That it has been a thing periodically throughout the series, and especially after the Scrappy-Doo centric cartoons, and I will eventually talk about him because I know that's coming up. There's been established that there isn't really anything supernatural in this one, or at least not yet. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea if there actually is or not, but it doesn't seem like it, at least for the time being. So I'm going to just kind of abstain from talking about that for right now. But in case, the final thing that Professor Pericles needs is an amethyst from the Darrow mining facility, which he points out is harvested underneath Crystal Cove. And sure enough, they gather it up from a large pile that apparently the Darrow mining facility just stores it in a large pile. They don't store it in any sort of container or anything. It's just sitting out in the yard. That's it. They're literally just sitting out right there for anybody to come up and take, which fittingly enough, Scooby and Pericles do. So yeah, that's why you store things in containers. Don't just leave them out, because you're basically just inviting people to steal them, especially when they're precious diamonds like a rose quartz. But well, not a precious diamond, but a precious gem like a rose quartz. Basically, don't put something valuable out in the open. That's just inviting people to come in and steal it. But in any case, with that, they then proceed to return to the science lab at the school, where Professor Pericles and Scooby successfully create 4 vials of antidote, and now that they've actually finished it, all that's left to do is administer it to the rest of Crystal Cove. And but it's at this point where Aphrodite actually barges in and claims that it's actually too late for them, and that they're not going to be able to use the antidote to save any of their friends, and claims that they're not going to get in the way of her and her crown, which causes both Professor Pericles and Scooby to do a double take and wonder what the hell she's talking about, since this is the first time they've actually heard about a crown. But in any case, Aphrodite then proceeds to summon her love zombies, as I'm going to call them, but and tells them to destroy the antidote and make sure Professor Pericles and Scooby are brought into the love. And sure enough, it works, and 3 of the 4 vials are snatched up and destroyed. With Pericles demanding that Scooby get in and steal the last one, which Scooby successfully does. He winds up grabbing the vial, and while Professor Pericles distracts Aphrodite, and then the two proceed to escape. And Professor Pericles then loads it into his little perch on Scooby's vest, which is revealed to be a syringe gun that somehow fits in Scooby's back. I don't fully understand the animation behind that, but it looks neat as hell, so I'm not going to complain about it. In any case, Professor Pericles prepares to load the gun and proceeds to get ready to go and find Mystery Inc. so that he can de-lovify them. Unfortunately, they don't have to look very hard, because right at that exact moment, the rest of the Mystery Inc. actually run into Mayor Jones, and Fred Jones Sr. and Sheriff Stone. So yeah, obviously the father and son just kind of hit it off a little bit with Fred Sr. pointing out to his son that he loves the way he builds traps, which obviously isn't true in the slightest in reality. At which point, Fred immediately points out that he's just loving everything and loves his dad. At which point, Professor Pericles charges in and administers the serum to Mystery Inc., which winds up curing them of their love. With Velma and Shaggy immediately breaking it off and letting each other go. While Fred and Daphne aren't shown doing that, it is notable that they do feel a little less strongly about each other now. But once they realize that the Mystery Inc. is no longer in the love, admittedly this is a little bit of a crazy thing that Fred Jones Sr. points out that obviously he is very much a weird thing. He points out that now that Fred Jones Jr. is no longer feeling the love, he now has to let out an unearthly scream and destroy him. So, and quite literally does that. Rent unleashes an unearthly scream to summon several love zombies to destroy him. So Yeah, it's at this point where all the love zombies start coming in, chanting "Not in the love." Which with the rest of the group figuring out what they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, and Scooby and Pericles obviously have no idea because they use the last of their serum on the gang. But it's at this point where Angel Dynamite shows up in the mystery machine and tells them all to get in, and sure enough they do, and proceeds to drive off and proceed to get as far away from the town as possible so that the love zombies won't follow them. And when Daphne questions why Angel isn't actually affected by the love serum or whatever it's called, she merely admits that she has no sense of smell and therefore it did not affect her. So yeah, she's completely 100% fine. But it's in any case where Professor Pericles decides to introduce himself, and notably, Angel Dynamite has an interesting reaction in that she seems to recognize Pericles, but Pericles doesn't seem to recognize her, or at the very least, he seems to somewhat know who she is, but it's not like he fully knows who she is. But interestingly enough, they do somewhat seem to know each other, even though it doesn't seem like they do entirely know each other. It's weird. It's like they obviously know each other, but I don't think they've officially met. But yeah, it is a little bit interesting that Professor Pericles and Angel seem to have some sort of history where they seem to know each other. That's the point I'm trying to make. But in case after parking on a cliff overlooking Crystal Cove, they then proceed to try and figure out what's going on, and Shaggy then proceeds to offer up an explanation that Velma points out is eerily similar to the plot of a Vincent Van Gogh movie. And sure enough, Shaggy points out that it was based on a true story, and I'm not entirely sure if there's any basis of that, but he claims it's like some sort of evil gorgon that came from the bowels of the earth and is trying to turn everybody into vampire robots. But yeah, that's basically that basically sounds deranged and is no way a true story. But in any case, it's eventually Professor Pericles who actually offers up a possible solution, pointing out that he took note of the kind of outfit that Aphrodite is wearing, and wonders if anybody else did as well. At which point Daphne then proceeds to point out that she did notice something was off about Aphrodite, and that she was wearing a prom dress. And with Fred realizing that's a good enough a lead as any, decides to drive back into town to try and figure out what's going on. In any case, they then proceed to go into the library and start poking around looking for evidence, with nobody being entirely sure where to start. Obviously, Scooby and Shaggy are just sitting in a pile of papers and are trying to figure out what's going on, while when eventually Velma does emerge from the same pile and eventually finds what they're looking for. And as it turns out, there was a girl named Amanda Smythe who wore the exact same dress during her prom, and obviously she was apparently elected prom queen. Which Scooby and Professor Pericles immediately remark is likely the crown she was referring to, and when the rest of the group asks her to explain, they point out that she mentioned something about a crown, but they have no idea what's going on, and sure enough Velma concludes that she was apparently reads and concludes that apparently she was elected prom queen, but apparently it was some sort of elaborate prank made by the people of Crystal Cove. So she kind of left Crystal Cove and left school and has not been seen since. So with what they believe to actually be their culprit now, Fred decides that now it's time to do the thing to go into the next phase. And when everybody just kind of blankly stares at him because they're waiting for him to say it, he merely responds that it's trap setting time, and asks them if they should have learned by now. But in any case, the group then proceeds to split up to go and find all of the ingredients they need, and set up everything they need for the trap. With Shaggy and Velma actually going to gather some fire extinguishers, and they also proceed to talk about and they also proceed to not talk about what happened. They kind of imply that they don't need to talk about what happened, and they kind of finish each other's sentence here a little bit and kind of finish each other's thoughts, but yeah, it's implied that they have a little bit of awkward feelings regarding what happened while they were under the effects of the Aphrodite formula. But yeah, they just kind of don't talk about it. They just kind of leave and go about their business. Meanwhile, meanwhile, Daphne and Fred, they actually have a bit of an open conversation, more of an open conversation about it, and with Daphne actually asking how much Fred actually remembers, and he merely responds that he obviously remembers all of it because the way it works is that it doesn't cause memory loss. People still remember what actually happened. It just makes them like each other. That's more or less all it really does. But in case when she asked him how it makes him feel, he merely responds that it didn't really change all that much. And while Daphne is initially dejected about the way he said that, he merely responds that he already knows all about how he feels about her, so he doesn't need a love potion to help him, which does cause her to become head over ears in love with him again. So yeah, while she was initially dejected, it is still implied that Fred still has feelings for her, and obviously he doesn't need somebody to figure that. He doesn't need a potion to figure that out. But in case the group then proceed to reconvene back in the science lab, where Professor Pericles has since whipped up enough of the formula to actually cure all of Crystal Cove. And he then points out, and then he then proceeds to, and they actually use the fire extinguishers to fill them all. So yeah, that's what the fire extinguishers are for. And Shaggy even remarks that it seems like it'll actually be enough to cure all of Crystal Cove. At which point, Daphne and Fred actually return. Having been in the drama department, they actually come back with several costumes, with Daphne pointing out that she may have quite a few good disguises for everybody. And Shaggy has his priorities straight. He immediately asks if any of the disguises are for him regard a skirt and wig and lipstick, and Daphne points out that he doesn't, but Scooby has to. So, which causes much to Scooby's chagrin, and he's not particularly happy about it, pointing out how unfair that is. But in any case, the rest of the group then dresses up and gets ready to put their plan in action using Angel Dynamite as help, as extra support. And Fred immediately, and what we find out is that they've actually gathered in I think City Hall or something, but they've gathered in a large open area and have brought in Aphrodite on a sedan, which if you guys don't know is this large carrying vehicle. I don't know the actual term for it. Obviously the sedan, everybody knows what the sedan in the car is, but the sedans are originally these large boxes on poles, and they're usually used for royalty, and basically Aphrodite just comes in on one of those, so and is placed down in her throne with Fred Sr. kind of orchestrating the whole thing, pointing out that when he gives the signal, they'll actually bring her crown. And sure enough, once she sits down, she's very happy about the fact that everybody is gathered there, because obviously she arranged it so that everybody would gather there, but in case once the group is there under the skies, with Scooby dressing in a very elaborate prom dress, which it's weird and funny at the same time, Shaggy and Velma pretend to be prom goers, while Scooby and Professor Pericles pretend to be a prom lady in a hat, and Fred and Daphne try to sneak away so they can set up the trap. And also Angel Dynamite is there. She pretends to be a mom, which winds up playing into their plan very well. But in any case, once Aphrodite is in position, they then proceed to get ready to spring the trap. And sure enough, Aphrodite actually cuts off Fred Jones Sr.'s speech, who is kind of gushing about the lovely Aphrodite, but she merely tells him to shut up and to stop delaying, and then tells her to bring her crown, which she remarks at long last she's finally going to have it, and also it's kind of not necessarily implied that they're going to make her Queen of Crystal Cove. They outright state that now she's Queen of Crystal Cove, and now that she's going to be crowned, she's going to see the town destroyed the way that it destroyed her. At which point, the Mystery Inc. pull out all the fire extinguishers that Angel Dynamite hid in her little baby carriage, and proceed to douse everybody in the town hall, which causes them all to kind of lose their ability to lose the potion's effect on them. And by the time Aphrodite figures out what's going on and orders them to stop, all of her minions have actually been doused, at which point her crown actually winds up falling out of the hands of the people who are going to coronate her, because they're no longer affected, and it rolls down the stairs at her feet, and she goes for a dive after it, but it's at this point where Fred springs her trap, which is revealed to be one of those giant carpet trap things, and winds up wrapping her up in a carpet and scooping her up, but and defiant until the very end, she declares that she's not going to go down so easily, and that this is not the will of Aphrodite. But it's at this point where they decide to actually unmask Aphrodite, and surprising no one, it's Amanda Smythe. But but what is surprising is the fact that she's kind of gorgeous now. So yeah, apparently she had some off-screen arc between the time she was supposedly elected prom queen and now, because she kind of grew in her looks a little bit and is now kind of a good-looking woman. I'm not gonna lie, she looks a lot better than she did back in the day. And also Daphne does actually comment on that when she gives her backstory, but in any case, Amanda Smythe then does proceed to explain her backstory with Velma kind of pointing out that obviously she's a little confused as to why Amanda would want to be prom queen so desperately, pointing out that obviously she was elected prom queen anyway, so it shouldn't be that big a deal. But Amanda then proceeds to point out that that she wasn't there, and proceeds to explain how when she went on stage they decided to pull a hideous prank on her by pulling the mask that she used as the basis for her Aphrodite costume over her head. And as she now looks like a monster, she then became deeply terrified at the fact that everybody was now laughing at her and ran out of the gymnasium. And then presumably switched town so that she could actually go on and become and presumably go on to continue her career and become better at her school. But long story short, after she dropped out of Crystal Cove High School, she kind of used her chemistry skills to develop the special formula that she was using throughout the episode. She created a synthetic pheromone that was designed to make people fall in love with each other. And her only real reason that she did that was so that she could steal the crown for herself. That was it. That's literally the only thing that she wanted. She just wanted the crown, and so that then soon after would be able to destroy the town the way it destroyed her by kind of just ruining everybody's lives the way they humiliated her back in the day. Daphne actually points out on the fact that she's not exactly ugly anymore, and even points that out to her face, pointing out that she's a much better looking woman now than she was back in the day. But Amanda merely responds that scars run deep, at which point she responds that she would have gotten away with it had it been for their meddling sidekicks, because obviously Professor Pericles and Scooby were immune and were able to save everybody. And Professor Pericles just chimes in from Scooby's hat, remarking that he's not a sidekick. And in any case, Amanda is then proceeds to get scooped up and is arrested. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what she did that would constitute as illegal. Obviously she made a chemical that was designed to make people fall in love with each other, but in all honesty, that's not that terrible. I'll be perfectly honest. That's not exactly the most evil thing anybody could have ever done in this show, or over in the history of the Scooby series. In any case, obviously she didn't break in, try to steal anything. She didn't do anything. I don't know what she did that would constitute as illegal here. I'm not a 100% on that. She literally just made everybody fall in love with each other so she could become prom queen. That's literally it. That is literally the entire extent of her plan. I have no idea how that actually impacts her or anybody else, but she's been arrested, so apparently she did something illegal. I'm not 100%, but I'm sure somebody will figure that out. But in any case, with that, Mystery Inc. then proceeds to leave, celebrating another job well done, pointing out that obviously Professor Pericles actually turned out to be quite a hero in despite everything, and even points out, with Daphne even points out that even psychologically disturbed birds can be heroes and pushed to the right breaking point, and possibly can change their ways. But then they actually hear a voice chime in saying to not be so sure, and sure enough, Ed Machine then proceeds to walk out from behind the Mystery Machine and properly introduces himself to Mystery Inc. because he hasn't done that yet. And long story short, Ed then proceeds to introduce himself as an associate of Mystery E, and proceeds to pull out a tape recorder telling him that they literally just got a recorded message from Professor Pericles that they need to hear. And what we find out is that Professor Pericles actually engineered the whole plot behind the scenes. As it turns out, he was the one who gave Amanda her Aphrodite formula, which she then used to brainwash the rest of Crystal Cove, and that would explain why Professor Pericles was so eager to help. Because as it turns out, in addition to actually finding the ingredients needed to create more antidote, he also all of the different places that he went were actually key to a plot that he has, which is that while he was in all the different locations that he went to go get the formula ingredients, he wound up stealing a conquistador shipping manifest, which is important to his plot. A titanium drill bit, which is a titanium diamond tip drill bit, which is designed to cut through stone, and also seismic records from Darrow mining facility to try and figure out some things there. And then the message ends with "Your move, Mr. E." In which Shaggy points out that he has no idea what any of that had to do with their mystery about what's going on with the Crystal Cove. Ed merely remarks that it has everything to do with Crystal Cove because, as he explains, a long time ago there was a treasure left behind by some conquistadors who first explored and settled Crystal Cove, and that the treasure actually contains a very dangerous and dark secret, and that Professor Pericles is currently working on unearthing that treasure, which he then remarks could mean the end of Crystal Cove, which shocks the rest of the group, and then Ed Machine just takes his leave. He just walks off. But in any case, that's where the episode ends, and yeah, this episode is interesting, and that's how it establishes that Professor Pericles is indeed an antagonist, and that's why he was locked up. But more to the point, this episode does kind of just continue the onward, continuing narrative that's going on, that something is wrong with Crystal Cove. Because obviously there's something called the cursed treasure that now Professor Pericles apparently wants, and I'm interested to see what that's actually going to be. But what's actually interesting here is that similar to Mr. E, who organized his own mystery, an entire mystery, so that the group could actually find the information they needed to continue the mystery. Professor Pericles did it so that he could, for his own ulterior motive, so that he could actually get the things he needs to actually find what Mr. E is currently investigating. So yeah, that's the main reason why this episode is interesting. And also the fact that I'm not entirely sure what Amanda got arrested for, but that's beside the point. But in any case, thank you. That's gonna do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, in any case, just go check out my videos linked in the screen as well. Top video is the most recent one based on what you've already seen from me, whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you guys want to check either of those out, be sure to go check those out. Link is on the end screen. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!